Not to be like, oh, hey, weeaboo about it. Konnichiwa, Samurai James here. I'm going to be opening the Blu-ray set for Ronin Warriors from RightStufAnime. I'm using my modern take on a Tanto by StoneBuiltKnives. If you want to get one too, link in the description below. All of those knives are handmade specialty type pieces. So take a look at the Etsy store there and check it out. Legendary Armor Samurai Troopers, the name that it was basically translated from the Japanese version, or Yoreiden Samurai Troopers, called Ronin Warriors here in the US. I'm going to be popping this out and taking a look at it in the next couple of days, so probably have a follow-up video talking about the quality difference of this compared to the DVD set. But for those of you who don't know what Ronin Warriors is, well, here's a summary. Ronin Warriors at a high level is a story of good versus evil. This is a series that was released in Japan in 1989 and 1990 that came to the US in the mid-95s. So all those 1990s style cliches, the good versus evil, of course, are present in this anime series. There was a DVD set released in 2002, which, boom, 20 years ago. I've watched it probably 2 or 3 dozen times since then. This was a very big part of my childhood. It was samurai, they were teenagers, they had weapons and armor, and everything about it was super cool. Of course, the Ronin Warriors are the good guys in this series, and there's 5 of them, and I'll cover their names and a little bit about them shortly. Their main bad guy is a guy named Talpa. He's the demon lord of the Netherworld. Talpa wants to take over the mortal world. Well, how's he going to do this? First, he needs to have a form in the mortal world. But to do that, he needs to gain enough power. So he has his 4 dark warlords battling against the Ronin Warriors to try to take over their suits of armor and their superpowers in order to take full form in the mortal world and then take over it. Then he'll own the mortal world and the netherworld. So we have 4 dark warlords with their superpowered armors and weapons fighting against the 5 Ronin Warriors with their superpowered armors and weapons. The first Ronin warrior, who is the leader of the group, is Ryo Sanada. He fights with 2 katanas, which are commonly called a samurai sword. His element is fire, and his virtue is just called virtue. In the Japanese version, it's actually benevolence. Next up is Sage Date. He fights with a Nodachi, which is a really large samurai sword. His element is light, and his virtue is wisdom. The third Ronin warrior is Sai Mori. He fights with a Yari, which is a spear, similar to this, except that it has blades that come up and down. It looks similar to a trident for people in the West. And his element is water, and his virtue is trust. The fourth Ronin warrior is Roin Hashiba. He fights with a bow. The Japanese bow is called a Yumi. I don't have one to show you for that. I did order one and it's being made, but it won't be here for a few months, and I wanted to get this video made. I'll cover that in an upcoming video later. Anyway, his element is air or wind, commonly referred to as strata in the series, and his virtue is life. Last but not least, Kento Rei Fong. His weapon is not particularly any historical weapon, though it seems to be an amalgamation of a few, which I'm going to cover in the second part of this video series. His element is earth, and his virtue is justice. Assisting the Ronin Warriors is Miyakoji, granddaughter of a professor at Shinja University, and Yuli, who is a young child whose importance becomes pivotal later in the series. Now for the Dark Warlords, the first up is Anubis. He typically fights with a Kusarigama, which this is a kama or a scythe, and in the show we see Anubis pulling it out in a chain. Just like so. Granted, the chain in the series is longer than this, but this Kusarigama is a real historical weapon. Now Anubis is the warlord of cruelty. His armor is associated with the season spring, and his virtue is loyalty. Kale is the warlord of darkness or corruption. His armor is associated with the winter, and his virtue is obedience. The third dark warlord is Sekhmet, the warlord of venom. He fights with 6 katana swords. His armor is associated with the fall, and his virtue is piety. The last Dark Warlord is Deus. He has a few weapons throughout the series. We see him with an iron ball and a chain. We see him with traditional nunchaku, and his main weapon, which is the string with a bunch of darts and rope sort of things on it, I'm also going to cover in the second part of this series, but there's no specific historical counterpart that I could find, so I don't have a equivalent to show you for that. His season is summer, and his virtue is serenity. Now, as far as episodes, this was not Dragon Ball Z or Naruto. It was not incredibly long running. There are 39 episodes from the TV series, and they were 3 OVAs, which are small movies, original animated videos, and that's all we have for animated on-screen material. Spoiler alert, some of the things I'm going to mention here do actually spoil some of the story, so if you haven't seen it yet, then go ahead and buy the Blu-rays or the DVDs, and then go ahead and watch it, and then come back, or just accept there's going to be some level of spoilers here. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a Power Rangers anime, and there are some parallels, but there's a lot of differences, and you can certainly say that it is not a Power Rangers anime. The first one is that there are commonly 5 Power Rangers, and there are 5 Ronin Warriors. Now, I'm going to profess, I didn't really watch a lot of Power Rangers. I think I saw a couple episodes when my brother was little because he's 15 years younger than me, but Power Rangers was not my thing, so I did a quick cursory check for comparison on this. In Power Rangers, it seems in a few cases there were actually 6 Power Rangers rather than 5, and Ronin Warriors does have something that's actually similar to that. Now, do the Power Rangers have these suits that they call on for mystical powers and weapons? Yes. Do the Ronin Warriors have that too? Yes. That's just not an unusual concept for the late 80s, early 90s, so that's not enough to call them equivalent things there. There's a lot of shows that have those sort of things. Voltron had it, probably some other ones I can't think of off the top of my head, but having those superpowers and suits is a very common theme back then. And another thing that was pretty common back then, there's a group of heroes that are fighting against evil to save the world. That was common back then, and nowadays it's actually still pretty common, so that, yes, it's similar between the shows, but also between a lot of other shows. Enough of the basic comparisons there. This video isn't meant to be about Power Rangers. I'm going to talk about some of the things that makes Ronin Warriors targeted towards a late teens or early adult, and in some cases even a full-grown adult audience. The first concept is there's a lot of character development. The characters themselves are not same at the beginning of the series as they are at the end, and they show some progression in between. This isn't like Scooby-Doo where every episode is, its own little bubble and there's no development of characters between them. So this is a really nice late teens, early adult thing rather than being targeted at children. Another one of the late teen and beyond topics is there's some gray area here. Yes, it's good versus evil, but there's spots where there's some gray areas and you have to kind of question and think, I don't know if this person's actually a good person or not. I don't know if this person's actually a bad person or not. So there's a lot more gray area than the black and white that we think of when we see the normal good versus evil battles. There's also the concept of trust. Can a friend become an enemy? Can an enemy become a friend? And in those circumstances, can you still trust them, or should you trust them if you didn't before? There's also the concept of responsibility in trying to save the world while not blowing it up. At one point, someone ends up doing a thing that causes a lot of damage, and they stop and they question themselves and they say, hold on, we're supposed to be saving the world, but we're actually kind of blowing it up. Is this the right thing to do? And there's a lot of that internal struggle of, am I becoming a bad guy by doing this sort of stuff while fighting the bad guys? And there's also the concept of humanization. It's good versus evil, and while a lot of the times they're fighting these empty suits that are spirits of whatever, and there's no big deal if they, air quotes, kill the people in the armor, there becomes a point where they realize we are humans fighting other humans. Maybe that doesn't really make us perfect heroes in this circumstance. What are we supposed to be doing? And there's a lot of internal reflection on that and how they end up going forwards. It also touches on the cycle of good versus evil and how this is ongoing. Even once this battle finishes in the future, there's going to be another good versus evil. Because just like yin and yang, one cannot exist without the other. Now, there's a lot of music in the series, and that's actually available through a few CDs as well. Not to be like, oh, hey, weeaboo about it, but the Japanese intro music is just so much better than the American version. I mean, I like the American version, that's what I grew up hearing as a child, but with the DVD set that I bought back in the early 2000s, it's got the Japanese opening to it, which is just so much better. Now, the TV series did have 39 episodes, and even though it's officially one season, it can really be broken down into episodes 1 versus 19 as one part of the story, and then 20 to 39 as a second season of sorts. I also mentioned those 3 original animated videos. The first one, Gaiden, is where Sage basically goes nuts and starts doing bad things in New York, and this is really putting a damper on Ryo's birthday party. The second one, Kikute Densetsu, The Legend of the Inferno Armor, that's where we actually find out there's another armor that is similar to the Inferno armor from the series that is just as powerful and worn by someone else. This is the first armor that we see outside of the core armors in the series, which introduces a whole new possibility of armors and superpowered people and weapons and armor throughout the rest of the world. And the third OAV message continues similar to Legend of the Inferno armor. We do see new armors introduced there as well, and another very, very powerful opponent who proves to be very much a force to be reckoned with for the Ronin Warriors. This Blu-ray series is not just the 39 episodes from the TV series, it also includes all 3 of the OAVs. So for the price of like $50, that is a fantastic deal. You know, it's about $1 per episode, and then $10 for the 3 OAVs. Definitely worth it. Would I recommend you buy this? Obviously I would. I would have made this video plus a few more following it if I didn't. This series was just such a big part of my childhood. It was a driver behind wanting to get samurai swords and samurai armor. And even though it's an anime, it drove me into the history of the samurai, the historical weapons, the historical armor, brought me to where I finally have my own suit of samurai armor. It's simply something that was really, really motivating for me as a child and as a young adult as well. I rewatch it every year, sometimes a couple times a year. I just absolutely love the series. I love all the things about it. I wish they would bring it back and do a reboot that would keep true to the original content instead of trying to like update it and modernize it. I just want more of what we had for the classic Ronin Warriors. Now, 2 shout outs and thank yous here. The first one is to RightStufAnime. I'm not associated with them in any way, but I just really appreciate the fact that they took a series that is 25 years old, that's a niche market, and they remastered it and put these Blu-rays out, so my thanks to them. And the second one is my thanks to Dawn Sonata from the Ultimate Ronin Warriors website, the URWWS. She's been very great at getting together some of the information for the upcoming videos that I could not have done without her. She's been a cornerstone to the Ronin Warriors community, keeping up with things on Facebook and just keeping up with that Ultimate Ronin Warriors website as well. So my thanks to her, and appreciate everything you've done for the community and continue to do. Now, if you haven't subscribed already, I invite you to do so. I'm going to have a couple upcoming videos as well. The first one is going to be a historical analysis of the weapons and armor of the 5 Ronin Warriors and the Ancient One, and then another video doing the 4 Dark Warlords and Talpa, so keep an eye out for those. And until next time, this is Samurai James saying thanks for watching and sayonara.